The media ate my homework.
Remember when you blamed your dog for that? Now it seems the media is everybody's scapegoat for everything.
And many times we have it coming.
It's a media identity crisis. Who are we? Who am I? Hold me?
Ooh, I'd rather not. I think I'm going to leave that to your wife. But until then, we're going to put it all on the table, lay it on the line. Radically Rational is next.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Radically Rational, the podcast. We're bringing facts back into fashion. We're just trying to make simple sanity sexy again. Those are the rules. We hold ourselves to it. And if I fail, I will hear about it from an 8-year-old girl.
That's just not logical.
And I'll have it coming for sure. Okay, my name is Paul Alexander. This is my friend and podcast partner, Anthony Pittman. True confession time. We're both media types. I don't know about you, but I blame the media. The media ate my homework. The media's responsible for ring around the collar and man's inhumanity to man. And I just want to ask you, Anthony Pittman, how do you feel knowing that you were a godless purveyor of fake news?
For many, many years, I guess I've loved it.
Yeah, I'm rolling with it too.
Yes.
The point is, we got this weird relationship in this country between news producers and news consumers. Kind of makes you scratch your chin and go, So we brought in an expert. His name is Hollis Grizzard, and I looked up the derivation of the name Hollis Grizzard. It means real smart guy. Welcome to the show, real smart guy.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. I think all of that's probably not as deserved as much as you served it up, but thanks. It's good to be with you.
No question. I want to let you know who Hollis is. He is one of the premier media consultants in the country, and I mean this, and he works for an outfit that is just dynamite. Audience research and development. They are based out of Fort Worth, but these are some heavy hitters for sure. And in particular, Hollis, what I love about your firm and you and your boss, Jerry Gumbert, you're very much visionaries and futurists. We've seen all of this change in American media over the last 20 years, but I know you feel that it pales in comparison to what we're going to see over the next decade. Is that pretty much accurate?
Yeah, I would say that's a really accurate statement. The corporate graveyard is full of companies that failed to see what was coming. And so one of the biggest jobs that our company faces, one of the heaviest lifts, if you will, is convincing our clients that they need to think about what's going to be happening in the next 5 years. And we can really see it coming right now. And I made a reference to the companies that failed to see that. The one that stands out for me is Kodak. In the 70s, Kodak actually invented the digital camera. But they said, this is going to ruin our core business. Let's put it on the shelf. And now we know what happened to Kodak. Blockbuster, that's another favorite of mine. Netflix, before they actually became a streaming service, went to Blockbuster, offered to sell the company to them. Blockbuster, which had, hundreds or thousands of stores worldwide, said no, thank you. And of course, we know what happened to Blockbuster. So one of the things that we struggle to do is to convince very successful businesses, clients, media, that they need to look forward and not be completely satisfied with the success that they currently enjoy. And in fact, that's one of the things I'm going to be doing with my team over the next 2 to 3 days. We're delivering the results of a research project, a news consumer research project, to an extremely successful television station in the Midwest. And our hardest task is going to be convincing them not to be satisfied with their huge success, but to start thinking about changing to meet the changing demands of the news consumer. So there's a wave coming, and we are trying to convince clients that they need to ride the wave and not get knocked over by it.
Hollis, it would seem like, though, through no fault of the clients, no fault of their own with your clients, that it would seem like you would have to literally pull teeth for them to realize that they've got to get away from the then and now and look to the future? It seems like a hard task on your end.
It is hard, and sometimes we're successful, and sometimes we're not. Typically, it's interesting, Anthony. The clients that seem to be the most open to change are the clients who are not doing well, the ones who are in, second or third place in the market in their particular business, because they reason that they've tried everything and they've nothing to lose, and so why not try and change what we've been doing because we haven't been as successful as we hope to be. That's easier to do. It's harder to get the successful companies to change what they've been doing because they're making pretty good money. There are some companies that do realize they need to go where the news consumers now are consuming news, and they change incrementally. But at the moment, the big push is to move away for most of our clients, which are television stations, to move away from concentrating most all of your resources on the on-air product and really begin thinking about realigning your resources more to the digital world, whether that be participating more robustly in social media, whether it be establishing their own OTT channels. And it's hard to get them to do that. But what we also say to them is, again, viewer research often really, or consumer research often really convinces them of this, is to stop doing things that really have low return. And there are a world of those. One of the pages that we're going to be displaying to our client in the next couple of days that we've done the research for is a list of content items that are in the newscast or that are online on the website, and the news consumers label them a waste of time. And there are a number of them that exceed 50%. If you do that, 50% of your consumers says that's a waste of time. So our job is going to be to try and say to the client, stop doing what's a waste of time, reallocate that money, that personnel, and that time to doing things that do matter. And hopefully they'll see the wisdom of that logic in the next couple of days. We do the best we can to convince them they need to change what they've been doing, and we cross our fingers and help them monitor it. But you're right, it is very difficult, Anthony. It's very difficult. As you well know, and as Paul knows, it's very, very hard to get a successful media outlet to stop doing what they're doing and start doing something that is, in their eyes, a risk.
So true, yeah.
But play to your strengths and listen to your customers. And Hollis, this would be the biggest change that I think I've seen if we look back over the last 20 years. The power relationship here has changed. For years, it was media outlets calling the tune. You're going to do what we want you to do, when we want you to do it. You want this newspaper, you're going to get it in the morning or the afternoon when we say so. You want news on TV? Well, you better sit your butt down at 5, 6, and 10, and we're going to tell you how this goes, and we're going to show you what we want to, and you're going to like it. And now, all of a sudden, that paradigm has completely rolled over in a healthy way, I think. It's much better. Now it's much more a traditional business relationship and business model here, in that the customer is the boss. So now, Hollis, as you indicated, if you're going to succeed, you now have to be where the news consumer wants you to be, and you have to give them the content that they clearly are interested in, and you need to stop trying to be all things to all people. Is that pretty much the way you see it? That's on the money. Absolutely. Our president and CEO, Jerry Gumbert, loves to tell this progressive story about, when I was growing up, if you wanted to know what happened today, you had to get the newspaper tomorrow morning. And then television news said, no, you don't. If you want to know what happened today, you can watch us at 6 and 10.
And then the digital explosion said, if you want to know what happened today, you can find out on your schedule, whatever you want to, whenever you want to find out about it, go online, go on your smartphone, and the likelihood is very high that we'll let you know about it. So the consumers are in control, and you have to be attentive to where they want news and information. And you have to be attentive to what they believe now is high valued content and what they think is low valued content. And unfortunately, and this is another tussle that we have as a company with clients and companies that we consult, and that is the low hanging fruit of news gathering in the old days and still today is crashes and fires and robberies and things like that, things that are easy to get. But in a large geographic area, they impact a very, very tiny, small area of the city like San Antonio. People find those kinds of coverage items of little use today. There are still stations that make their living off of doing that, red lights and sirens. And in some smaller communities, and this is the dilemma we face, in some smaller communities, there still is a high degree or high appetite for that kind of coverage. But in most cases where we do research, the viewers are saying, I'm not interested in that. Give me something that impacts me, or give me something that's deeply interesting to me. Tell me a story.
Yeah, storytelling.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me a story. And in most cases, it's tell me a story about people versus officials.
Yeah, what you're describing, the old way of doing it is what I used to call McNews or false hustle. And the idea, because you really were trying to put one over on the viewer, or people who displayed this kind of content were, we're chasing these lights, we're hustling. First of all, not only does it have limited news and intellectual value, Hollis, it's the laziest thing in the world. Yeah. You're trying to convey how hard you're hustling, and you could not be more lazy.
Yeah, true. And it is lazy journalism to depend on filling up the container of news you have to offer with stuff that most people say they don't care about, and that quite frankly, if consumers wanted to see high-speed chases and car wrecks and standoffs and things, YouTube has so much more of that kind of video that the value of those kinds of things in local television newscast or on local television or media websites is so small that if they really want that kind of high impact visuals that we used to live off of 20, 25 or 30 years ago, there's so many other places to get it. That's why even in weather, if you wanted to know what the weather was going to be tomorrow, you had to watch TV that night. You don't have to do that anymore. Most people, especially younger people, go to their webs, go to their smartphones. I can get an hour by hour forecast. I'm flying out today to go visit the client I described earlier. And when I look at what the weather's going to be like in that particular city, I open up an app on my smartphone. I don't check either the Weather Channel or look at a local TV newscast. So even weather, which used to be the bell cow, if you'll forgive that old expression, even weather has lost so much of its value in local television news and in the media, because you can get it at so many other places.
That's why it's been cut down a newscast from back in the day, 5 minutes to 4 to 3 to 2, now a minute and a half. So,
well, and that would apply to sports too, because back in the day, if you were to learn anything about any sport in the world, it would have to be in that local television sportscast. Well, now you've got access to all of that stuff, so the content has to change, or there's no reason for it to be there. Okay, Hollis, you mentioned this reallocation of funds on television stations. taking it from the on-air product to digital. Now, I'm saying this with a complete sense of humor, but it was always a real vexation as a news director because the goalposts were going to move every 15 minutes and the rules were going to change, and you really had to tell your staff to just kind of go with the flow. So the analogy or the metaphor I would use is that digital content right now is like chopsticks. Everybody thinks it's cool, but nobody's really figured out how to use them.
You're right. It's very difficult to actually ask a business to spend money on something that won't get them a return in that quarter.
Or maybe this quarter of the century. I'm being facetious, so forgive me.
And so, I mean, you have to continue to remind them and show them data, not just the data that we collect, but the data that's available from lots of national research companies that show where consumers are moving. And although there may not be a profit margin in it at the moment, and maybe it's a loss leader, that is where you need to be as soon as you possibly can be. Now, let me talk about one more thing you said, Paul. It reminded me of lots of conversations you and I've had before.
Right.
And that is that we used to, when you and I were in the newsroom years ago as practicing journalists, we used to say, and the researchers would tell us that attitudes and opinions change about every 24 months. You can measure the shift in the appetite of news consumers about every 2 years. So we would say the shelf life of this research project is about 24 months. And now we see rapid changes occurring in 6 months. It's that radical. To not to steal your title. It's that radical.
Rebrand us. That's good. Feel free to do that
anytime. Out there,
please. That's great.
The changes are that fast, and there are few companies really that either keep up with it or stay ahead of it. The one that comes to mind most often is Apple. They go to where they're going to pull us. The consumers go after something that Apple invents that we never even knew we wanted or needed. But that's the exception. Most companies are hesitant to do that because they have to answer to what did they make in the next quarter, and it's understandable. So, but regrettable.
Ultimately, it's a human communication business, and that involves human emotions and human impressions. So, Hollis, I want to ask you this, and Anthony for sure, because this is what I see happening. We have a really, really broken relationship right now between media outlets, news producers, and news consumers. And look, part of what we do here is we want to be watchdogs on the media, and when there are egregious problems, we're going to call them out. But I would maintain that this lack of communication is being reflected on both sides of the equation, the news producer and the news consumer. The news consumer is convinced that they have the right to declare any demonstrable fact they don't like to be fake news. Okay, so that's a problem there. And of course, there is just enough fake news, unfortunately, to reinforce that notion. So yeah, when we see violations of news principles, ethical principles, journalistic principles, we're going to call them out without hesitation. But on the other hand, Hollis, part of this is a lack of faith and, frankly, a lack of integrity on the news consumer. Once you've granted yourself the license to ignore any demonstrable fact you don't like, and in fact have granted yourself the license to deny the very concept of facts, yeah, there are problems on the news side, but there are problems on the consumer side.
There are problems on both sides. Again, I because I've most acquainted with the research project we're about to go to deliver, the central question that the client wanted answered is, how much do they trust us? And fortunately, in this particular city, the trust in our client is pretty high. But they also compared that to the trust of other stations, the trust of national media, the trust of newspapers, and the closer, and this is something that's not borne out just in our research, but in other research, the closer the media is to the consumer, the higher trust level that exists.
Right. You hate the national media. You hate the so-called lamestream media. But I like my guys. And that's just kind of human nature for sure. But you're talking about this issue of trust. The name of this show is Radically Rational. I'm going to say something radical.
Okay.
We're asking the question, why should the consumer trust the news media? Given the attitudes of some news consumers, why should the media trust the consumers right now? It's a trust issue.
It is a trust issue, and the only variable that we can influence, the only variable that we can tinker with, is the way we act or react, or the way we cover news. And what we're finding across all of the research projects we do, coast to coast, we're finding that fact checking is the highest desired coverage image for all consumers, whether they're far left or far right. They want you to demonstrate to them that you have checked your facts.
Hollis, but it's aggravating because now we have people attacking fact checking as fake news.
Yeah, I understand. And here's the thing, Paul, that caused me to feel a little better about this relationship that we have with news consumers. This is the first time we've done this in quite a while. In the news consumer project that we have just recently conducted, we also ask, and we haven't done this in a while, we ask for their political leanings. Are you very liberal, somewhat liberal, moderate, somewhat conservative, or very conservative? And in this particular market, the very conservative was, I wouldn't say a sliver, but it was a small part of the overall news consuming audience. But they were the most vocal about fake news. Mm-hmm. And they're the most vocal when it comes to calling this media outlet and saying, this is, you're not checking your facts, you're not lying, or you're lying. What our message is to our client here is, look, you're going to always get that. It is the nature of the environment, the political environment that we live in today. But all of the other indicators in this research project show that trust in this particular media outlet and in the competitors, in fact, in this particular media market, their trust is pretty high. It's at the national level where you've got such contentiousness and such animosity that it will bleed over invariably into local coverage. But when you ask outright, how much do you trust this station or that newspaper or this station, the closer you get locally to that particular consumer, the level of trust does go up. Even though you've got people that will holler and make noise about your coverage, particularly when you're covering a national story, that's not going to stop. I don't think that will stop. But
Hollis, please excuse me if this question comes across as really simple and very basic here.
I'm all in favor of that question.
Why? Can you put your finger on maybe where it began or why the general public seems to, and I put air quotes around the word, hate the media? And is that really true?
I don't really think, Anthony, they hate us. or hate the media. I think that I think when we begin to when media begin to diversify, you didn't have the big three or the big four, but you had cable channels that went far left or far right. It's long been known that consumers gravitate to stories or coverage that seems to agree with their basic understanding or beliefs about their situation, about government, about the economy, whatever. So because it's reinforcing their already held beliefs. So the farther apart from the middle that those channels begin to now it's like, everybody can broadcast. It's the farther apart those go, the more tension I think is placed upon the rest of the consumers and the news purveyors in the middle. But again, I have more confidence than I've had in a while when we're looking at the research that asks the basic question: how much do you trust this station or that newspaper? That the recent research causes me to feel better about our position than I did 3, 4, 5 years ago. I think there's always going to be people that will not like what we do. I think there's always going to be a segment of the population that's not going to like bad news or news that goes counter to their previously held beliefs. I think that's always been there. I just think that social media has given an outlet to the most outrageous condemnations of the media from people who previously didn't feel they had a voice.
Is the local television station closest to the so-called middle? Though I do think of one particular organization that owns a lot of television stations in this country that isn't so much towards the middle. We don't have to say that company's name.
Oh, I think we all know who you're talking about. There are lots of companies that own lots of television stations, and the corporate leadership of the one you're talking about clearly has a political leaning. It is very difficult to have every minute of every television station's newscast for all of the television stations that this particular company owns adhere to whatever the corporate leadership wants them to do. That's hard to do. I think the corporate leadership tries to do it from time to time, but you've got a lot of, journalists generally think of themselves as fairly independent minded and push back against things that they think are boxing them in, and when it comes to coverage. So I know what you're talking about. I understand. It hasn't, to me anyway. And by the way, I actually do have one of those stations as my client. I have not seen them or heard of them, except in a few rare instances, say we're being told we must do these certain things. There are must runs. Don't make any mistake about that. They have national things that are must runs, but those occupy a very small portion of the local coverage.
Okay.
Hollis, over the years, I've come to the position now, and I can't take credit for the quote, but somebody once said that journalism is all about holding the powerful accountable and responsible, and that actually defines journalism. So it's moving beyond who, what, where, and when, and to how and why and with what effect. And anything outside of that is not journalism, it's a press release. So in terms of shaping content, airtime is a finite resource, as is digital space. You know, you got to fill it up, but that's all you got. So the whole idea is to make sure that you don't waste a frame, that you don't waste a dot, that anything you're doing has a purpose. And ideally, it should be branded, exclusive content that you're not going to get anywhere else because you won't have access to it anywhere else.
You're exactly right. The bread and butter of television news 25, 35 years ago used to be event coverage. Okay, if something happened, we went out, we recorded it, we came back, and we put that on, event coverage, whether it would be a wreck or something like that. The successful television stations today, or the successful media outlets today, go deeper. They do report not just on the who, what, when, where, and how, but why. And that, I think you mentioned that, the why something happened, or the why someone reacted the way they did, or why are the taxes going up, or this is dangerous is this intersection the most dangerous in the city? Why are the questions that oftentimes don't get answered? And I think that is probably the essence of journalism. Why are things happening the way that they're happening? You also talked about something else, holding the powerful accountable. That used to be the most, that we used to receive the most pushback for doing investigative journalism. And understandably, when you do an investigative report, you are actually calling out something that's not working the way it's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. You're calling out possibly, most likely, a person or persons for doing something that they shouldn't have done. And so that's going to be upsetting to them, particularly if they hold powerful positions in government. It's going to be upsetting to their associates, their friends, their relatives, and you're going to hear about it. But I think that in addition to reporting on the why things happen and the how they happen, holding the powerful accountable is a really critical pillar of what journalism was and should be moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it really is true that it takes some guts to do that on the institutional level, in some cases on the individual level. I mean, Hollis, you spent a lot of time as an investigative reporter. I have so much respect for really good investigative reporters. I've been privileged and honored to be in a management position where I was overseeing some of these projects. And I will tell you, we're all human beings. And nobody likes hearing what a dirty ratfink you are. And when I look back on it, Hollis, I think it's really the daily abuse that I miss the most.
You're a glutton for that punishment.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Paula, you and I worked together before, and I did that for 18 years, mm-hmm. And it is not. Let me rephrase that. It is a stressful pursuit, and it does take some guts. I mean, I really do think that the people who, and there are lots of fine investigative reporters still working that are still practicing that craft. It takes a thick skin. It takes a measure of. You have to have nerves, and you do have to know that there will be people who will criticize or condemn you or find fault with what you did. And here's one more thing I want to say about this. There has always been a lot of talk about objectivity. The reporter, particularly the investigative reporter, needs to remain objective. And I find that if that truly is a basic tenet of journalism, objectivity, we have to realize we all come to the table with experiences, and objectivity, while we strive for it, is very, very hard to obtain because we're not a blank slate. The thing that I always tried to do, and as I talk to investigative reporters at some of our clients, I always I always tell them that I think the best thing you can do is to be fair, is to and demonstrate the level of fairness in your reporting.
That's a much better word. I agree.
Yeah, and I, there's no doubt that there are bad people in the world. Okay, there are some bad people, but in most cases, most investigative reports are focused on a bad action. Somebody did something they shouldn't have done. And so I think the approach for those who continue to pursue this craft is to allow that person to explain or get or help us understand why this occurred or why you chose to do what you did. So I think that fairness is the ultimate objective. None of us really come to an investigative report believing that objectivity is completely 100% obtainable, because if you're doing an investigative report, you're pursuing something that doesn't appear right. Something's not happened the way it's supposed to happen, or some harm has been caused to somebody or some group of people by some system or some other people. And if it's by a system, that system was created by people, and so you try and trace it back to who did this and why.
I like the standard of fairness,
yes,
in particular.
I know, Hollis, I know we only have a few minutes left here, but when we look back at the consumer for a second, is there a chance the consumer, though very smart, is a little confused with what's news and what's commentary? Because commentary or opinionated news programs are the highest rated in the country, so why wouldn't they stop?
Well, yes. Are they confused? Yes, they are. Why do they gravitate toward that? I think it's the same reason that they gravitate toward media that seems to support their beliefs. And if you have commentary that aligns with your beliefs, you tend to move more towards that, consuming that particular content. Mm-hmm. And there is confusion, I think. Maybe we haven't done a good enough job of explaining what commentary and news coverage and investigative reporting is, because there are different standards, obviously, at least for us. I don't think we've done a good enough job, probably, of helping explain what that is.
Man, I'm so with you. You talk about media faults. I think that one is on us. I think these blurred lines between news and commentary, if you want to look at who's responsible for that, look in the mirror. Okay, yeah. That was a system that was created by us. There were a lot of things driving it. There was the 24-hour news cycle. There was somebody finally figuring out that you could make big money in news. So now we need all this content, and the cheapest to produce is commentary. So we're saying that when we see a media violation, we really want to hold their feet to the fire. And Hollis, this particular issue that you're talking about, the blurring the lines between news and commentary, I think that is 100% the fault of the media.
Yeah, I think we haven't done a good enough job of it. We haven't done a good enough job, I don't think, of helping the news consumer understand what how we operate, why we do what we do, and how we do it. There's a term that was coined a couple of years ago. I think I'm not sure where it came from, but it's called process journalism. And essentially what that is a reporter explains the process that he or she went through to get the information. Mm-hmm. So it does two things. It number one, supports how it supports the fact that you went and double checked something by doing the following things. Mm-hmm. It also solidifies the level of trust, or builds the level of trust that the consumer has in you, because you have taken them along for that journey of exploration as you try and find out something, rather than just saying, here's what happened, and here's why it happened, and here's a quote from so and so. You put them on your shoulder, and you take them along for the journey of collecting the information that you're going to present to them. process journalism, I don't think we do nearly enough of that, although we probably should.
It promotes transparency for sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's the new transparency. That's a great term. Process journalism is the new transparency, explaining why you're saying what you're saying because they were along with you when you collected the information.
There are certain things, Anthony and Hollis, that I do not want on my conscience ever.
What's that?
And at the top of the list is I never want to make Hollis Grizzard late in catching an airplane.
Oh, no.
So we've only got 1 minute left. So this will set the scene for the next visit that we have because we've enjoyed this so much. We've talked about the changing landscape. Will the 10 o'clock news locally even exist a decade from now, realizing that for me it doesn't matter because I'm asleep at 8:30 anyway?
Oh, boy. And we only have a minute.
I got all day, man. I just don't want to make you late. So,
I think there will be a 10 o'clock news program of some sort 10 years from now. The shape of that, I don't know. I can tell you that my personal feeling is from looking at the research over 50 years now of research, that the likelihood is that the day-to-day content that we now cover in a newscast will all be available and consumed online.
okay.
And that news programming per se, the 5, 6, 10, I think those will go more to, and people roll their eyes when I say this, but I think those will go more to large, long format pieces of content a la 60 Minutes, where you take 2 or 3 high value topics and you cover those thoroughly in that 30 minutes. So instead of a minute and 15-second story from a reporter, you've got an 8.5 or a 9.5 minute story. And it's a deep dive on the content that matters most to the widest audience, or it's on content that is the most interesting to the widest audience. So I think it'll exist, but I don't think it'll be anything like we have today.
Oh, brave new world. And I hope that look into your crystal ball proves accurate because as a news consumer, I would be fascinated by that. And I actually would prefer that because that would help round out the full picture of the information that I receive throughout a day. I have enjoyed this so much. Our guest is truly one of the top flight media consultants in the country, Hollis Grizzard Jr. from Audience Research and Development. Like I said, he's pretty good as a soothsayer here. So we want to thank you first of all and wish you safe travels and hope that plane gets off on time because like I said, we don't want to be responsible for that. You talk about holding the powerful accountable. I don't want that on my slate.
Okay. Good to see you both again.
Thanks,
Our
Hollis.
pleasure. All right. Man, interesting stuff. And Pitt, I will say this. Look back on your own. Man, you've seen some things. Man, you've seen some changes. And if anything, the pace of change is going to accelerate.
What Hollis mentioned at the end there, my wife would like to hear. Her big concern is, as a television news reporter and anchor, is being phased out one day. But she's an investigative reporter. So as Hollis would say, that's pretty much a good gig to have. If we go into more,
well, she's got more job security than you do. For
yes,
example.
she does. And she feels like she doesn't, but maybe in the long run she still does. If there is always room for good storytelling, as Hollis mentioned, the 5, 6, 7, 8, 10-minute projects, that's good. Good process journalism, good storytelling.
I'll tell you something I'm happy about. If you guys haven't already figured this out, let me make this formal. This is our new podcast partner. This is the new permanent co-host of Radically Rational, the podcast, and a frequent contributor to radicallyrational.com. Anthony, I'm so happy. I'm so grateful that you wanted to come aboard here because you have a wonderful presence and the contribution that you make here. I could not be any more comfortable. I could not be any happier about this. Just want to make it official.
Is that on a prompter somewhere? Did someone tell you to say that?
That would presume I could read, okay? So,
no, thank you very much, Paul. I do appreciate it. And I think we're going to have fun with this. Why not, right? We're going to take some deep dives into some really hot topics, controversial topics. dissect them, open them up, and just throw them out there for this this space to watch and enjoy and contribute with.
Fun is not a dirty word. It's why we founded Radically Rational, for example.
Honesty.
Yeah, we want to take when appropriate, we want to take the subject matter seriously, but we never want to take ourselves too seriously. And if you're not having a good time, we're failing, because that's a big part of our mission. So I want to encourage you to visit radicallyrational.com. I'd like to think it's a pretty entertaining website. We've got daily videos. We've got a news blog. We've got a sports blog. Boys just want to have fun.
That's how it always rolls out eventually, right? Yeah. And if we have fun, I think you'll have fun as well. So.
All right, so that's radicallyrational.com. And the reason, we're bringing facts back into fashion, and we're trying in a crazy world to make simple sanity sexy again. Anthony Pittman, thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
All of you, thank you very much. See you next time on Radically Rational, the podcast.